Hello folks, this is Sula speaking. You're listening to another video for Teamfight Tactics. Well, we're getting to the end of set 13. This always happens. The sets run their course for, I guess, about 4 months now we get each set. But eventually they come to an end, and we actually just had set 14's information popping up after the set 13 World Championships. It's going to be on the PBE, the public beta environment, in like a day or so. So it's time for me to record my traditional look back at the set that we just had. We're going to talk about what went well, what didn't go so well, what I liked about the set, what I didn't like about the set. I do this every time, and it's a good way to just look back and talk a little bit about the set that took place. My overall impression of set 13 was it wasn't a bad set. I think it was perfectly decent. If out of all the TFT sets, it probably grades out a little bit above average. Like it's probably like a solid B to a B plus. But I do feel like the set was kind of disappointing overall, and that's largely because this was supposed to be one of the big sets. There's some sets that get more priority than others. Set 10, the music set, got a lot of priority. Set 6, back when they did the initial Arcane set, got a lot of priority. And just like more time and resources went into this set than went into like set 12 or set 11, which were kind of pretty clearly placeholder sets. And by that standard, I do think that this set was kind of a disappointment. So anyway, we'll talk more about that. As I said, go into more detail. As far as the background footage, this is a video that Antisocial Monkey sent me. I actually have not played TFT in the last week or so, and he sent me some footage of him doing a family reroll game. So we're going to put this on in the background so you have something to watch as I go through this. All right, with no further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk first about some of the things that I thought went well or were well done here in set 13. And I'm going to start with theming. This is something that I usually talk about at the beginning of each set when I go back and review them. And the reason why I always do this is I think it actually does matter quite a bit as far as sets having good theming. What I mean by that is, was there like a clear focus to this set? And some of the sets have failed pretty miserably on this. When I did the set review for set 12, I made it pretty clear that I didn't think set 12 had particularly good theming at all. It was just kind of random stuff all over the place, and there wasn't much tying it together. That was not the case here in set 13. This set very clearly was focused around the Arcane series that was on Netflix. It came out right at the same time as Arcane's second season came out, and the influence of it was really obvious all throughout this TFT set. You had a whole bunch of units that are not in normal League of Legends, but were added to the TFT set because they were in the TV series, or the Netflix series, I guess more specifically. I think they ended up with almost 10 of those champions. Ones like, I don't know, Steb and Maddie and Rennie, and just these people that I had never heard of before playing this set. And I think I played the set before I saw the Arcane series, but it really had the feel that you were kind of like in this Arcane world, because almost everything tied back into the show in some way. Not everything. I mean, I'm looking at this carousel here where there's like a Gangplank and like a Twisted Fate, so like there are definitely units that had no connection or just kind of tossed in to the set, even though they didn't actually have anything to do with the series. But there was a definite feel that you were like kind of in this Arcane world, especially when you were playing traits like Enforcer or Rebels, or when you hit some of the late game units. A lot of them were pulled directly from the show. So, you know, if you'd have, I don't know, as I said, like an Enforcer board going up against a Rebel board, or if you have like a family reroll board here, like Antisocial Monkey is playing here. Now, like obviously Draven, Darius, not really in the Netflix show, but still you get the idea. You're re-rolling here for Vander, Powder, and Violet, and then as the board gets upgraded, you can move into like the Vi as you get deeper into the game. So anyway, I do think that this matters, and I do think that it helped give this set a real identity. Now, it feels a little bit weird because Antisocial Monkey is using the Magic Workshop background from the previous set. That's a little bit of a contrast, but overall, though, I do think that they hit on this pretty well with the theming in this set. So kudos there. You could really feel the Arcane setup when you were playing this. Next thing I'm going to cover, champions. I always talk about, again, this might seem like a minor point to people who play like a billion. If you play like 500 games every set, this doesn't matter. But how easy is it to distinguish the champions from one another? And I think that the set did a pretty good job of that. I do think that this matters a lot. Visual clarity really does matter. It helps you learn the set faster when you can tell who all the units are and they're like cleanly distinguished from one another. Visual clarity matters a lot. It also helps when you're doing roll downs and you're trying to roll through units very quickly. It's like, yes, if you do play 400, 500 games per set, this doesn't matter because you just memorize everything, but most people don't play that many games, and I do think it matters a lot. Set 13 did a good job of that. Like, I'm looking at the store right now that ASM has here, and like a lot of the champions either use their base artwork or something very close to that. So like Urgot is using his base portrait art, Ziggs is using his base portrait art, Camille is using something that's very close to her base portrait art. They have like an enforcer coat on her, but otherwise it's pretty much her base portrait art from League of Legends. So, this wasn't a perfect fit for everyone. You can see the Amumu on here. That doesn't really look like Amumu because he's got Automata trait here. But by and large, the visual clarity was pretty good in this set. It was pretty easy to see which unit is which. I'm looking at the Tristana on the board right now, also used her base art, and it wasn't that difficult to distinguish the units. Again, there were some cases where things were a little bit wonky, but by and large, visual clarity was pretty good in this set. And again, I really do think that that helps a lot. So kudos to them for that. I know they can't do that in every set, but like the next set upcoming, set 14, is going to be this cyberpunk futuristic theme, and I can't tell anything apart because none of the units look anything like their normal League of Legends counterpart. Again, I talked about this a lot back in set 3 when I was like, oh, set 3, the sci-fi set. Every single unit is somebody, futuristic person holding a gun or futuristic person holding a laser sword. Obviously, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it was legitimately really hard to tell all the units apart because none of them look like they normally look like. So anyway, again, I don't mean to keep belaboring the point, but I do think that this matters, and I think that set 13 did an excellent job here, and hopefully that helped hopefully that helped the set in terms of people learning it and then keeping player retention as the set went on. All right, let's talk about some of the cool stuff that was in this set, because there were some pretty cool traits and some pretty cool units in this set. Out of the units, the one that jumped out to me was Rumble. Rumble having the upgrades that you would get over time. Again, not a new mechanic. They've had some stuff like that in past TFT sets, but still really neat that you could upgrade Rumble over time. That unit was also overpowered for most of the set. I think Rumble was probably the strongest 5 cost for most of the set. But, there was a cost to it. You did have to pay extra gold to get the upgrades. And one of them, I think it was like the Petrosite burst, was like completely useless, and they never fixed that for no clear reason. All of the other upgrades were a lot better. But still, a neat unit, cool design. Definitely liked that unit and thought that it was fun. So other cool stuff in terms of trait design, there were some very creative traits in this set. Now, of course, there were a number of repeats, but that's inevitable by this point. It's set 13. There's going to be some repeats by now, but there were some legitimately cool traits in this set. First of all, I want to call attention to probably my favorite econ trait since Heartsteel in set 10, the Conqueror trait. A really, really neat trait, and one that I actually ended up playing a lot. Conqueror trait was you would get additional stacks based on how many units you were killing on the enemy board. And if you weren't killing enemy units, you actually didn't get anything. Like literally you got no benefit if you weren't killing enemy units. And the deeper you went into the trait, the more stacks you would get. It was generally seen as being a somewhat weak trait for most of the set, but like I think that was needed. If the trait had not been weak, it would have been overrunning every single lobby because it kind of like had to be a bit of an underpowered trait because it's intended to be a trait that you can only play if you're playing from ahead. And I really liked that design because if you could, play deeply into the trait, usually if you could get you would usually have to hit like an early Swain and get like +1 to the trait from an early augment or emblem. But if you could do that, it was really, really strong. So it was like not something that you could play every game. But if you could play it, then it was just this really neat trait where you would just try to play from ahead and like make use of the stuff that was dropping. So a really, really fun trait. I love the design. I'd like to see more econ traits like Conqueror in this game. The exact opposite of Chem Baron trait, which I thought was very poorly designed, which I'll talk more about as we go on there. So kudos to that, a really fun trait. Academy trait, another great trait. It basically described as exalted trait from set 11, but in item form instead of trait form. Again, at the beginning of every game, it would pick out 3 items that would then be sponsored Academy items. And Academy units, if you played into Academy trait, you'd get free copies of those items, and they'd also give a whole bunch of additional stats to Academy units, particularly if you played deep into Vertical Academy. If you got 6 Academy, which was all the Academy units plus an emblem, I think you could get like 21% damage reduction and 21% damage amp just for putting 1 sponsored item on an Academy unit. Like, that's a lot of stats to get from 1 item. So it would really encourage you, if you were playing deeply into the trait, to try and make the sponsored items, which is a really neat way to think about doing things. And you'd sometimes find yourself building items that you would never normally build, just for that exact reason, because they were sponsored items. Or you could just, splash the trade and just like get 1 free item for free. Play Academy 3 and just get 1 extra item. Just like with Conquer trait, you could play Conquer 2 for like the early game and then pivot out of it. So a lot of room for flexibility there, and a lot of interesting stuff going on with that trait. So again, I thought that was a really fun one that they added to the game. Similarly, Form Swapper. I don't know that Form Swapper quite achieved what the developers were going for, but the idea was you'd have these 4 units, Gangplank and Swain at the 3-cost tier, and then Elise at the 4-cost tier, Jace at the 5-cost tier. And they could be played in either front row or back row, and they'd have actually different abilities and different stats depending on where you played them. Again, I don't think that the concept quite worked entirely, because most of those champions were always played in one role. Elise was always played in the front row up until like the final patch, when suddenly the developers were like, oh shoot, we forgot that we forgot that we wanted people to be able to play back row Elise, and then they buffed back row Elise, so she was suddenly played in the back row at Worlds. But like Elise was pretty much always played front row. Gangplank was pretty much always played back row. Swain was almost always front line. Jace was almost always back line. So I don't think it quite achieved what they wanted to do, but it was still a neat concept. And there were definitely times where I can remember if I was playing Sorks and I hit an early Swain and I actually didn't need him to frontline, I could stuff him in the back line to get additional damage. And I think I did play Jason, both melee and ranged forms, a couple different times, depending on what items I was hitting at, or what comps I was playing, what items I was hitting. So like a really cool trait, even if it didn't quite have as much flexibility as I think they were hoping for. Again, well designed. I'm sure it took a lot of development time to essentially have 2 versions of each of those 4 units. And also the kind of thing I'd love to see more of in the future, because anything that promotes flexibility is really good for TFT's gameplay. And if I have to mention one other trait, I'd also mention Emissary. Again, Emissary basically ninja trait. Basically ninja trait from some of the earlier sets come back again, whereby you get the bonus if you're playing 1 unit, and you don't get the bonus if you're playing 2 units or 3 units, and then you get a bigger bonus if you're playing 4 of the emissaries. Really interesting, because all of those units were pretty splashable. You could put Tristan for attack speed, could put Nami on the board for mana generation, etc. And there definitely were team compositions that wanted to play all 4 emissaries, especially if you hit like an early Garen or hit an early Ambassador. You could be like, oh, maybe I'll play the 4 emissary variant of this team composition. So again, a neat trait, well designed. I think it was pretty fun, and I had actually wanted to play a 4 emissary game for a long time, and then towards the end of the set I finally managed to get some good footage of a 4 emissary game, but I've been trying to play towards that for a while, and I kept not running into situations where I could actually play the 4 emissaries. But again, really, really fun trait, nice stuff. All right, I will also mention here the main set mechanic, which was anomalies. Again, on 4/6, you would pick out 1 unit and you'd basically give them an additional ability. I thought this was okay. Like, it wasn't as bad as some of the other set mechanics. I certainly liked it more than encounters in set 11, which, by the way, are apparently coming back for set 14, which is really disappointing to me. But yeah, I did like this more than some of the other set mechanics. It basically was, it was fine. It didn't do that much harm. It was pretty much just like putting an extra item on your main carrier, on your main tank. The biggest issue with them is that they were not balanced. Like, they were really, really not balanced. And it was hard to tell that at the start of the set, because the developers removed all the augment data and they never gave us anomaly data, so it was a little hard to see that. But like, if you played the game, you knew that they were not balanced. Some of them were way, and I mean way, better than others. Like to a degree that wasn't even close. So that was a little bit disappointing. But as a mechanic goes, it was all right. Like it was okay. It was okay. Could have been worse, could have been better, but yeah. So that's anyway. That's kind of my take on that. Is it could have been a lot better, but it worked out okay. By the way, a good roll down here from ASM. He hits all of his one cost 3 stars at the same time, even though he did have to sacrifice some econ to do it. But nicely done. All right, so again, I guess I could say more there, but I just thought the anomaly was just, it was okay. It was all right. Could have been better, but it wasn't terrible. It wasn't my least favorite mechanic. It could have been a lot worse. And in this category, while we're wrapping up what I thought was good, the set 4 revival. I actually spent a lot of time playing the set 4 revival because I really like set 4. And maybe this was a bit of an indictment of set 13 that I spent so much time playing set 4 instead of set 13. But I really did enjoy the set revival. The big problem was it was very, and I mean very, very poorly balanced. And that was a shame. I wish they'd put a little bit more time into balancing it because it would have been fun to play more of the set revival. But the lack of balance meant that there was only a couple of things you could actually play, largely based around spirit in some form, because that was freaking broken for pretty much the entirety of the set revival. But I did get a lot of fun out of it. I made 10 different videos of the set revival, and I think I only did like 35 videos total for this set. So you can see I spent an awful lot of time playing the set revival, and yeah, I gotta say it was fun. Bring back more of that. Bring back more of that set, because again, the chosen mechanic is like the best mechanic they've ever come up with for set mechanics. Just keep bringing that back, please. All right, well, those are the things I liked. So now we have to take the other side of the coin. We do have to cover the things I did not like, because I do think that there were some pretty big issues with the set as well. And that starts with Arcane the show. One of my biggest issues, and one thing that I think really did hurt the set, is I think Arcane the show took preference over TFT Arcane the game, if that made sense. It definitely felt like okay, so back when there was set 6 done, set 6, which was the initial debut of Augments, that one was also Arcane themed. That was when the first season of Arcane was out on Netflix. And it was pretty clear that set 6 took a lot of influence in terms of like theming from Arcane. The problem with this set, though, was it felt as though the show came first and then they bent the game around the TV show instead of the other way around. And I don't think that that's the way that you'd want your game to be designed, because a lot of the thing, like they seemed like they were consciously trying to force things into the setup for the show. The anomaly being a good example. Like, did the anomaly really fit the theme of this set? I don't think it did, but it was in the TV show, so they decided they had to put it into the set, I guess. I don't know, like, otherwise, in every other respect, the anomaly didn't really fit the set at all. But they made it the big set mechanic, I guess, because it's in the TV show. We got to do something with it. Also, look at how they rolled out the 6 costs. The 6 costs weren't even in the game for the first, week or 2 weeks of the set being on the live client. And that's because they didn't want to reveal spoilers from the TV show. Like, they didn't want to reveal spoilers. It's like, oh, wow, yeah, well, did you know that Warwick was actually Vander? Oh, wow, yeah, nobody knew that. But, like, they were so desperate to avoid spoilers from the TV show that the 6 costs weren't even in the set at the start of it. So that was a clear case of where the set's mechanics were taking a backseat to avoiding spoilers from the TV show, and I don't think that that was great. In addition to that, the set was also clearly released before it was ready. Normally, the sets are on the public beta environment for 2 to 3 weeks. One of the sets was on there for 3 weeks before it got released. This set was only on PBE for, I think, like 5 days before it went out, and that's because, well, the Netflix show was coming out. They had to put it out on the live client. So again, they were very clearly bending the gameplay of the game into knots just so that they could try to fit better with what was going on in the TV show. And I do think that that was a problem, for lack of a better word. I don't think that was great for the health of this set, that Netflix, the TV show, was kind of the person walking the dog, and then TFT's Arcane series was the dog getting walked, if that makes sense. So I don't think that was great. And by the way, Arcane the show, Season 2 really wasn't that great. I'm sorry if your Arcane stands out there. I thought that Season 2 was a lot worse than Season 1. I don't really want to go into the details. You can find people who discuss that elsewhere, but they were trying to do way too many things at once, and the season was an absolute mess in comparison to the much more focused first season of the show. But anyway, we don't need to get into that there. But yeah, they like did everything bent over backwards to fit better with the show, and the show kind of wasn't that great in Season 2. don't roast me too badly. I know a lot of people like Arcane, the show, but I was pretty disappointed with the second season. All right, getting back to the game, though, let's cover some of the other mechanics. The next one that has to be mentioned is the 6 cost. The 6 costs were not a good mechanic. So the way that these were implemented is that there would be these 3 kind of super-powered units, Victor, Mel, and Warwick, and they would start showing up after the anomaly appeared. But the designers wanted everyone, they said this in their interview, not their interview, they always release like a post-mortem on the set after it's done. And what they said was that they wanted everyone to have access to the 6 costs. So the way that they decided to implement them was they'll be completely independent of level. They'll just always have an odds to appear in the shop. Doesn't matter if you're level 6 like ASM was going into this round. Doesn't matter if you're level 9 or level 10. Everybody always has the same odds to see them. Now, later, they then buffed up the odds when you were level 10, but like you get to level 10 so late in the game, it was almost irrelevant. So everybody has the same odds to see them, and the odds are like preposterously low. Was a 0.48%, and then they go up slightly. So it literally just turns into a complete slot machine and nothing else. Literally just pull that slot machine and hope that a 6 cost will come out. This was really problematic when they first came out because Victor was incredibly overtuned to the point where people would like remove very obvious necessary synergies from their boards just to put Victor on the board because he stunned the entire enemy board for 2 seconds and also armor and magic resist shredded the entire board, which is just insane to have one unit doing that. So you easily had games that were being swung by, oh, somebody found something in the shop at 1/2 of 1% odds. Now all of a sudden they go from losing the game to winning the game. I mean, come on, that's even in a game like TFT, which is a game of controlled randomness, that's not what you want. That's not healthy. You really don't want to have that. So not a good mechanic. And then of course you had Mel, who if she cast 12 times, you would not die when you hit 0 HP. Instead, you'd survive on 1 HP instead. Not a great feeling. So many people cheesed out extra placements that they didn't deserve based on just playing Mel on their board for a while. And again, it's not like getting Mel. It's not like you have any agency in terms of getting Mel or any of the other 6 costs. It's just dumb luck as far as whether they popped up on your board or not. So a pretty big failure in terms of a mechanic as far as I'm concerned. I really, really did not like this mechanic at all. And I really wish that it had not been in the game, unfortunately. But nothing to be said, nothing to be done about that. That's just what ended up happening, unfortunately. But maybe they could have just not put the 6 costs in the game. I think the problem was they felt like they had to put like Warwick in the game. I think they felt like they just had to. But yeah, again, like I said before, Arcane the show took preference over TFT Arcane the set, and that's not a good thing. Other mechanics I wanted to mention. Starting encounters. We used to have portals at the start of the game, ever since set 9 when they were first introduced. And that would mean everybody would vote on what portal they wanted. Instead, they were replaced with encounters. And I thought that was a pretty big downgrade. I know not everybody agrees with this. I know some people like the encounters, but as I said, I think this was a pretty big downgrade. Just large, and again, the encounters mostly did the same thing as the old portals, but there was a crucial difference there, and that is you did not get to pick. There's no agency at all. In the old system, you would get to vote on which portal you wanted, but under this system, you didn't get to vote. It just was assigned at the start of every game. Just assigns a portal to you, or assigns an encounter to you, and you have no say whatsoever. So the counter argument would be, oh, well, come on, when you were voting, you only had 1 out of 8 odds to vote anyway, to which I would say, well, yes, but first of all, 1 out of 8 is not 0%. That's 12.5%. If you play a lot of games, that actually does add up over time. Like the difference between I never get a say in which one I want, as opposed to I get a say, in 12%, that actually does add up, and it makes a big difference over time. And furthermore, on top of that, it actually wasn't even 1 in 8 odds in a lot of games, because my experience in past sets were there were a lot of people that just didn't vote on the initial portal. They would either not have an opinion and they would just stand in the corner, or they would be away from their keyboard, AFK, and they just wouldn't vote for that reason. So it was pretty common to have only like 5 or 6 people voting. I mean, if there's only 6 people voting, your odds go up pretty substantially. That goes up to about 17%. Then you're looking, again, I'd much rather be able to pick what I want in 1 out of 6 games than not even get the chance to pick. And further, on top of that, I play a lot of double up. In double up games, there's only 4 teams. So we would get to pick what we wanted in 1 out of every 4 games. And on top of that, a lot of the times teams wouldn't vote in double up either. Sometimes we'd get 1 in 3 odds to pick what we wanted. So I'm just saying that, just saying like, oh, well, 1 in 8, you never get a chance to pick. That's actually not true. We actually got to pick a lot based on my actual experience of playing the game. And now it's replaced with the system where we have no choice at all. Like, how is that an improvement? I know the developer said, well, it took too long, which I'm just like, wait, are you kidding me? It took like 20 seconds to pick at the start of the game. What a joke. So anyway, I did not agree with that, and I thought that was a pretty substantial step backwards. Just like, if you're going to have this mechanic, let people pick. Like, why not? It's really dumb not letting people pick. So, oh well. I thought that was a definite step backwards and a real problem. By the way, in terms of the footage we have here, ASM had a really good early and mid game, but like his board is starting to fall off, but he actually gets a lifeline here because there's a family emblem here. That's going to let him play 5 family, and he's going to start getting the family cash outs. If you've never seen this before, when you get to 5 family, you start doing these heists, and you actually start getting cash outs as well, which is pretty funny. I only had this in 1 game ever, and I was never able to get good footage of it, so I'm kind of glad I get the chance to show 5 family here. But anyway, enough of ASM's footage in the background. Let's continue onwards with our coverage of the stuff that I didn't really like that much in this set. Now, this is kind of a more abstract point, but I think this bears mentioning because this has been a real issue, not just in this set, but in the last 3 sets. The big problem is there's no middle traits in TFT, is the way I've come to describe this. Emblems are too dominant. What do I mean when I say there's no middle traits in TFT? Well, in every vertical trait, you never want to play the middle version of the trait. So to give you examples of things like this, when you're playing rebels, you never play 5 rebel. Like this enemy board's a rebel board. You always play 7 rebels, never 5. 5 is terrible. Always play 7. If you're playing enforcers, you always play 6 or 8 enforcers. You never play 4 because 4 is terrible. If you're playing sorcerers, you never play 4 sorcerers. You play 2 sorcerers to splash it, or you play 6 sorcerers. If you're playing visionaries, you never play 4 visionaries. You play 6 visionaries because that's where the benefit is. Now you play 2 or 4. This is the case with every single vertical trait. You never play the middle tier version of this trait. You always have to go towards the full vertical version of the trait. You either splash it at the lowest level or you play the full vertical version. This is not an accident. This is a deliberate design decision. Riot Mort has been questioned about this in interviews, and he has repeatedly said he doesn't want the middle version of these traits to be any good. He has repeatedly says that the full vertical always needs to be better than the middle version of the trait. And I think that this is a real problem because this is the 3rd set in a row they've done this. They did this in set 11. They did this in set 12. They did it again in set 13. It's so obvious that they're deliberately suppressing the power of the middle version of these traits. And the reason why that's bad is because it kills flexibility. If you went back to some of the earlier sets, it was extremely common for you to play the vertical version of the trait, but then if you could get to like level 9, you would start replacing some of like the 1 and 2 cost units in the trait with like other 5 cost units or other 4 cost units. The idea would be like you would give up some of the power of the trait in exchange for just playing better units. This was extremely common in like set 4, set 6. I remember doing this all the time. But they have remade the game such that it is not worthwhile to do this. It is not worthwhile to cut the 1 and 2 costs because the full vertical version of the trait is just too powerful. It's just not worth it to do that. So that is, as I said, a real problem because it kills the flexibility of these traits. You have to play the full vertical version, and that means there's not much flexibility. Like I said, you always have to play 7 Rebel. That means you have to play 7 Rebel units. So the other side effect of that, aside from it not being very flexible and killing the ability to, drop down to 5 Rebel and play more 5 costs, the other thing that makes that a big issue is it makes emblems incredibly powerful, and we've seen that for the last few sets. Ever since set 10, although I guess emblems were really powerful in set 10 as well, but you couldn't get emblems from augments in set 10. They deliberately made it you couldn't get emblems from augments because it was the music set where they had the headliner mechanic. They deliberately removed that option. But definitely in set 11, set 12, set 13, it's very, very clear. The emblems are super duper powerful because when you get an emblem that gives +1 to the trait, all of a sudden you have to play Rebel 7, but now instead of playing a terrible unit like Vex or Akali, you get to put that Rebel emblem on somebody who's actually decent. Like maybe you put it on, I don't know, Echo. Maybe you put it on Ambessa. Maybe you put it on LeBlanc to pair with Vex. Not Vex, to pair with Zoe. You get the idea. The emblem makes your team incredibly powerful. So the game has been heavily biased towards verticals and heavily biased towards emblems for a while now. And I just think it's not great for the long-term viability of these sets. I think it's partly why these sets get boring pretty quickly. By the way, apparently Savika got a slot machine cash out, because that was a lot of gold popping up on ASM's board here. But as I said, I do think it's really killing a lot of the replayability of these sets. And I think that's why I'm getting more tired with them quickly, because the flex play is not there in the way that it was in some of the past sets. By the way, look at all these duplicators here. This is a really nice for ASM, because now he's going to be able to duplicate his way into Vander 3-star, because he just got 4 lesser champion duplicators here. Not too shabby. I wonder if he also almost could have gotten the Urgot 3-star as well, but I guess it doesn't matter. He doesn't need Urgot 3-star. So anyway, that's more of an abstract point, but I made that same point back in set 12 as well, and I've noticed that it's really an issue that you just cannot play the middle version of these traits. All right, in addition to this, I have to call this out. Chem Baron was the worst trait in this set, as far as I'm concerned. A really, really poorly... If Conqueror was a well-designed econ trait, Chem Baron was the exact opposite. Can only be played as a lost streaking trait. The idea is you get Chem Baron in on 2-1, and then you lose a whole bunch of rounds, and then you cash out. And you, by the way, you don't even need to win a round. It's not even like Old Fortune where you had to win a round to cash out. You didn't even have to win a round to cash out Chem Baron. Just get up to 500 stacks. If you're still alive then, boom, you just insta-win the game. I remember seeing someone who had War for the Undercity, which is the augment that gives you additional health every time you turn down a Chem Baron cash out. Like, they got War for the Undercity for their first augment. They got Chem Baron Crest for their second augment. They got Soko off the stage 3 carousel because they were first pick because they had, like, I don't know, 50 health at the time. And then boom, boom, boom. They just hit 600 stacks. They didn't even win a round. Absolutely nothing we can do. Insta-win the lobby as soon as they get their cash out. Like, what's interesting about this? You might as well be playing a single-player game because it's so unreactive in terms of how the gameplay goes. Like I said, you literally might as well just be playing single-player. Just a terribly designed trait. I know that they keep putting these in because there's a segment of the player base that loves the whole, let's just lose 10 rounds and then get a big cash out and then win the game. I know there's a segment of the player base that likes these, but these are just terrible for gameplay balance. Please do more things like Conqueror trait. Do not keep making these slot machine cash outs. They're really, really bad. And then if I have to make one last point, one other thing that Riot Games did is they removed all the augment stats for this set, and I really hated that. It's just a terrible decision, and it looks like they're going to stay with that. They do not seem like they're going to pull that back for the next future set after this one, and that's really, really disappointing because the augments were extremely unbalanced. Just like the anomalies were really unbalanced, the augments were really unbalanced as well. By the way, ASM got another Vi, so he's actually on 6 Vis, and oh, there's 7 Vis. Okay. So yeah, he's getting close to Vi 3-star here in this game. But it's like they just didn't want people to know how unbalanced the augments were, and they were very unbalanced at the start of the set. The anomalies were even worse. So what was Riot's response to that? Just remove all the data, as if removing the data was going to hide the fact that these augments were super unbalanced. But it's just not cool. I've used the example before of being like, over time in baseball, people realized that like a lot of the traditional stats were not very valuable. In particular, things like batting average and runs batted in were actually pretty terrible at evaluating how good players were actually doing. So people moved to other newer, more advanced statistics that gave us a much better idea of what was actually like who was actually performing well and who actually was not. It's as though Riot's response would be as if Major League Baseball, in response to all of this new data coming out, would be to just be like, we're just not going to let people publish box scores of baseball games anymore. Let's just hide what's actually happening. For one thing, it doesn't work, and it didn't work in this set either, because it was very clear that there were groups of online, like the people at the top of the ladder formed like study groups, and they were sharing data. There were also some of the stats websites that were internally tracking this and just hiding it from the public. So like if you paid subscription services to them, you could suddenly get the augment data. Like what are we doing here? Turn it into like a cheat code version of who can get access to the data and who can't get access to the data. Really, really bad stuff. And again, just covering over for the fact that This stuff was really, really unbalanced. By the way, there's Vi 8, number 8, and oh my god, there's Vi 3-star. And yes, that's why ASM sent me this video, because he managed to make a Vi 3-star in this game, which is pretty hilarious. But anyway, like I said, you get the point. Hiding augment data, not cool. Really, really did not like that. Apparently it's going away. Just let us see the data. We can't even see what augments we took or what anomalies we took when we look back at the post-game replays. But not that we have replays, but I mean like the post-game score sheet. A lot of the time I'd be like, oh, cool, I wonder what anomaly this person took because they did really well when they beat me. Well, too bad. You can't look it up because that information's hidden. Yeah, not the best. So add all this up, and as I said, I think this set was decent overall, but it did feel like it kind of lacked the fun factor of a lot of the other sets, and I'm not exactly sure why. I don't know if it's just because I was, by the way, that person just surrenders the lobby, so that's it for this background footage. I don't know if it's just because I've played more TFT and I'm getting more tired of the gameplay after going through so many sets, but it didn't feel like this one was as much fun. And again, this all would have been fine if this had been like a normal set, but the problem was this was the big Arcane set. Like, this was the showstopper set that they spent all of their time in like the last year working towards. It wasn't like set 11 and 12, which were placeholder sets. This was the marquee set, and I don't think it lived up to that. So like, while this was kind of like a B set, like if I were to grade it on like A through F, I think it was like a B. As I said, it was kind of above average for a TFT set. It did not live up to the hype that we were expecting, and I think it was a disappointment in that respect, at least for me. Maybe other people like this, but I think relative to the hype we had going into the set, it was kind of a disappointment. So that's a little bit too bad. That said, I think I like the set more than set 14. It hasn't come out yet, and I don't like anything I hear about set 14. So yeah, maybe I'll be looking back more fondly on this down the road. Well, anyway, until then, once again, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed this video. Until next time, take care, folks, and I'll see you again soon.